Tonight, global commerce is reeling after the Supreme Court struck down the Trump-era tariffs, rewriting the rules of international trade. The decision ends a decade-defining America First policy, creating a new, uncertain landscape for businesses and consumers. Markets surged, but steel and aluminum stocks crashed, signaling a seismic shift. This ruling forces us to reconsider presidential power, the future of American manufacturing, and our global relationships. From steelworkers in Pennsylvania to farmers in Iowa, the impact is immediate and deeply personal. As of January 16, 2026, the path forward is unwritten, and the consequences will shape a generation. To truly understand the headlines dominating today's news, it's essential to revisit the fundamentals of economic warfare, a concept that shapes global relations and everyday life more than most realize. Economic warfare isn't just about numbers or policy, it's about power, influence, and the strategies nations use to protect their interests. At its core, tariffs are taxes placed on imported goods. Governments use them to make foreign products more expensive, hoping to encourage consumers to buy domestically produced alternatives. This can protect local industries, save jobs, and sometimes even spark innovation at home. But tariffs can also raise prices for consumers and provoke retaliation from trading partners, making them a double-edged sword. After World War II, the United States led a global movement away from tariffs and toward free trade, convinced that open markets would foster prosperity, peace, and international cooperation. This shift helped fuel decades of economic growth and created a web of interdependence among nations. However, in recent years, the Trump administration dramatically reversed course. They argued that free trade agreements had hollowed out American manufacturing, cost millions of jobs, and allowed countries like China to exploit the system by not playing by the same rules. This marked a turning point in U.S. trade policy. Tariffs quickly became the main weapon in a new, more confrontational trade strategy. This approach challenged decades of bipartisan consensus in Washington, sparking fierce debates among lawmakers, business leaders, and economists about the best path forward for America's economy. The U.S. began acting unilaterally, imposing tariffs not only on rivals like China, but also on long-standing allies in Europe, Canada, and Mexico. This aggressive stance triggered trade disputes, protests, and a wave of uncertainty across global markets. As a result, the world was forced to adapt to a new reality, one where the United States prioritized its own national interests above the spirit of global cooperation, reshaping alliances and economic strategies worldwide. In this new era, tariffs have become the sharpest spear in America's economic arsenal, wielded not just as a tool of policy, but as a symbol of a nation willing to fight for its place in a rapidly changing world. In 2018, the Trump administration launched a bold new era in U.S. trade policy, invoking a rarely used law, Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, to justify sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. The move was framed as a matter of national security, with the administration arguing that a strong domestic steel and aluminum industry was essential for the country's defense and economic independence. This marked a dramatic shift from decades of free trade orthodoxy, signaling a return to protectionist policies under the banner of America First. Critics, both at home and abroad, questioned the wisdom of targeting long-standing allies like Canada and the European Union, who had long been partners in both trade and security. Many argued that these tariffs risked alienating key allies and undermining global cooperation. However, the administration remained steadfast, insisting that economic strength and national security were inseparable and that America's interests must come first, even if it meant ruffling diplomatic feathers. The initial tariffs on steel and aluminum imports quickly expanded, sparking a much broader trade war, most notably with China. The administration accused China of unfair trade practices, intellectual property theft, and massive trade deficits, leading to additional tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods. The conflict dominated headlines and sent shockwaves through global markets. For U.S. manufacturers, the new tariffs meant higher costs for raw materials. Many companies faced a difficult choice: absorb the increased expenses and risk lower profits, or pass those costs on to consumers in the form of higher prices. This ripple effect was felt across industries, from car makers to appliance manufacturers, and ultimately reached the wallets of everyday Americans. Retaliation from trading partners was swift and targeted. China, in particular, struck back by imposing tariffs on U.S. agricultural exports, including soybeans, pork, and other staples. This move devastated many American farmers, especially in the Midwest, who suddenly found themselves cut off from one of their largest markets and facing plummeting prices for their crops. The tit-for-tat escalation between the world's two largest economies created a climate of global uncertainty. Companies around the world were forced to rethink their supply chains, reconsider sourcing strategies, and brace for unpredictable market swings. Stock markets became more volatile, and business leaders expressed growing concern about the long-term impact on global growth. In response, some companies shifted manufacturing operations overseas to countries not subject to the new tariffs, seeking to minimize costs and maintain competitiveness. Meanwhile, American consumers began to notice higher prices on everyday goods, from washing machines to groceries, as the effects of the trade war trickled down to store shelves. Ultimately, the tariffs redrew the global trade map, forcing businesses and consumers alike to adapt to a new reality. The consequences were felt in every aisle and industry, from automotive and technology to agriculture and retail, reshaping the way America and the world does business. The legal battle began as soon as the tariffs hit, with businesses arguing the administration overstepped its authority. They claimed Section 232 gave the president unchecked power, violating the Constitution's separation of powers. Lower courts hesitated, deferring to the executive on national security, but a 2024 appellate decision questioned the law's vague definition of national security. This split among courts pushed the Supreme Court to take the case, asking, are there real limits on presidential tariff power? Billions in commerce and the constitutional balance of power hung in the balance as the world watched. The Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that using Section 232 for broad tariffs was an unconstitutional executive overreach. The court limited national security to direct threats, restoring Congress as the main driver of U.S. trade policy. Dissenters argued the president needs flexibility, but the majority insisted on clear limits. The immediate effect: tariffs under Section 232 are void, and the Treasury must stop collecting them. Billions in potential refunds are now on the table, and the president could dismantle other tariffs soon. The separation of powers has been powerfully reaffirmed. The ruling's impact will be felt in your wallet. Lower steel and aluminum costs mean cheaper cars, appliances, and canned goods. Retailers and manufacturers welcome relief, but U.S. steel and aluminum producers face layoffs and plant closures. Internationally, allies celebrate the end of tariffs, paving the way for renewed cooperation. For China, it's a major de-escalation, though deeper tensions remain. Politically, the decision rebukes America first and will fuel fierce debate in upcoming elections. Supporters call it judicial activism. Opponents hail it as a win for the rule of law. The debate over protectionism versus free trade is far from over. This ruling simply changes the terms of the conversation. On the ground, reactions are mixed. Detroit auto executives are optimistic. Lower costs mean more investment and jobs. In Pittsburgh, steelworkers feel betrayed, fearing job losses as cheap imports return. Iowa farmers, battered by retaliatory tariffs, see hope for rebuilding lost markets. Small business owners nationwide anticipate lower costs and a chance to win back customers. The ruling brings relief to some, anxiety to others, and a new reality for all. The voices of workers, executives, and entrepreneurs reveal the human stakes behind the headlines. For many, it's a chance to breathe again or brace for change. To unpack the long-term impact of these sweeping changes, we turn to Dr. Evelyn Reed, a leading economist at the Peterson Institute. With decades of experience analyzing global markets and policy, Dr. Reed offers a nuanced perspective on what lies ahead for the U.S. and the world economy. Dr. Reed describes this as the most significant shift in U.S. trade policy in the last 50 years. She emphasizes that restoring congressional control over trade decisions is a major step toward greater transparency and accountability. This move, she argues, is likely to bring much-needed stability to both domestic markets and international trading partners, reducing the uncertainty that has plagued businesses and investors in recent years. However, Dr. Reed cautions that the transition will not be without its challenges. Steel and aluminum producers, who have benefited from protective tariffs, may face increased competition and financial strain. At the same time, manufacturers and exporters who rely on imported materials are expected to see significant benefits, including lower input costs and expanded market access. This shift will create winners and losers across different sectors of the economy. The central policy challenge, according to Dr. Reed, is to ensure that workers who are displaced by these changes are not left behind. She advocates for robust investment in workforce retraining programs, job skills development, and targeted support for affected communities. By equipping workers with new skills and opportunities, the government can help smooth the transition and foster long-term economic resilience. When it comes to China, Dr. Reed points out that ending tariffs is only the beginning. She stresses that deeper, more complex issues, such as intellectual property rights, technology transfer, and fair competition, still need to be addressed through ongoing negotiations and international cooperation. Dr. Reed believes the U.S. must now focus on building strong coalitions with allies and engaging in patient, strategic diplomacy. Rather than acting unilaterally, she argues, the U.S. should work collaboratively with other nations to set fair rules and resolve disputes, strengthening the global trading system. For everyday consumers, these policy changes are likely to result in lower prices on imported goods, making household budgets go further. For investors, the renewed stability and predictability in global supply chains make international markets more attractive, potentially spurring new investment and economic growth. In Dr. Reed's view, the era of unpredictable trade policy by tweet is over. The return to stability, careful deliberation, and evidence-based decision-making marks a new chapter for U.S. economic leadership on the world stage. Tonight, we stand at a crossroads. The Supreme Court has ended the Trump tariffs, but the story of global trade continues. Consumers and businesses feel immediate relief, and alliances are mending. Yet, uncertainty looms for communities built on protected industries. The debate over how to support American workers in a globalized world now returns to Congress. This ruling is about more than prices. It's about the country we want to be. A new day for global trade is dawning, and the next chapter is ours to write.